All right, and we are live.
Cool. All right, well, welcome back to your next session for the Women in Non-Binary Bike Summit. I am here and presenting for this next session, which is all about planning your ride. Oops. Oh, come on. And there we go. Sarah went over the housekeeping items in detail, but I want to go over them again because they're worth resharing. So gather anything you might need, whether that's, a personal item, a blanket, something to eat. Make sure that all your creature comforts are taken care of now so you don't miss anything. It's up to you whether you have your video on or off. Do whatever is most comfortable. We recommend using speaker view so that you are going to get the most out of your experience, seeing the person who's talking or the person who's presenting. And then any questions and comments, please make sure that you direct them to Kea. She is dubbed herself the Bike Pittsburgh moderator. It should be the first option within the chat. So as long as you don't change anything, it should be good. And then don't worry if you do need to leave to take care of an issue, to, calm yourself, to get more coffee, or, whatever you need. Don't worry, because we will have these sessions available for viewing at a later date. Again, Sarah went through the community agreements before, but they're so important to make sure that we go over them again. Mostly, we just want to make sure that we are creating the supportive and positive environment that we strive for. Again, like the Women in Non-Binary program is made to make sure that everyone feels included. So we want to make sure that we are giving each of our speakers and each of our participants here, everyone who's watching and listening, we want everyone to feel respected. We want everyone to feel like they're not being judged. We want everyone to, feel that we have a sensitivity to diversity. So there are people here who are not like you. There are people who are like you in some ways, but not others. And there are people who are exactly like you. And we want all of them to feel just as spoken to. And please make sure that you step up and step back. So if you're someone who talks a lot, maybe, sit back and listen for a little while. And if you're someone who doesn't speak up a lot, we want to, challenge you to ask your questions and make sure that you get your voice heard today. And without further ado, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. We have three wonderful speakers today. We have Tarra Gundrum, we have Suz Falvey, and we have Monica Van Dieran. We're gonna start off with Tarra Gundrum.
All right, good morning. I'm going to share my screen here. All right, hopefully that is up. Hopefully, can I get a thumbs up if you can see my presentation here? Awesome, okay, great. So I'm going to start by just sharing a little bit about myself. So I'm Tarra. I'm from just north of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in a town called West Bend. I'm a Marine Corps veteran, and I came to bicycling at age 34, and I've just been in love with it ever since. So what I like to do is get into how you can go on a multi-day bicycle touring adventure and enjoy all of the wonders of our great outdoors. So here, how do you get started with bike overnights? Mainly, bicycle overnights are really inexpensive and easy to kind of get started. So it actually is probably the most popular way to get involved with a long distance touring or multi-day touring is to start with a bike overnight. And you really don't need any special experience. You can do this close to home, and you don't really have to go out and buy brand new gear. It's just a really nice way to kind of gather what you have or even borrow some items to get started. Some of the basic gear that you're going to need is the things that will help you keep going, like a tube, patch repair kits, a pump, tire levers, hex wrenches, and food, right? So I love touring because I love eating. That's one of my favorite parts about going on tour is enjoying the food while I'm out there. The best time to travel is really whenever you're available, but if you can kind of target you're planning around a weekend or a long weekend, that's more ideal for your first bike overnight, because you can really go far and have good fun and a great experience and not a whole lot of time. Here, I'd like to share just a quick photo of one of my recent bike overnights. I took my dog Maggie out to a Bike Your Park day, and this is something that I share because it doesn't have to be like hard or super intense or crazy. Like, you can like include your fur babies, you can take friends along, and you can really make it a wonderful, enjoyable experience for all, and you can bring your loved ones with you. So that's something to consider when you're thinking about bike touring or overnighting. So one of the biggest questions that I receive when folks are considering going bicycling is, how far can I go in a day? Like, how much time do I need for my tour or my overnight? And I share this image because it is truly a broad-based guideline. But one of the things that I like to share that's been very true to me, that I guess an elder of the biking community passed down, is that never bike more in one day than you can drive in 1 hour. So I tend to not plan over 50 miles a day. Like, I'm usually between a 50 and 60 miler, and that's about it. I'm not that 100-mile a day gal. That's just not me. So consider the road, consider the terrain, consider the amount of gear that you're carrying, and consider your physical ability. Know that you don't have to match some chart, or you don't have to match some person. Like, really just evaluate yourself and make sure that you only plan what you can comfortably do, because your number one goal is to enjoy it. So if that's 30 miles a day because you are on some intense terrain or you have a lot of gear to carry, that 30 miles is going to be an amazing 30 miles. So love it, own it, and plan it for you. All right. So little transition here. When you're getting into long distance, that multi-day kind of approach, what you want to do is maybe work backwards. So I like to evaluate where I ultimately want to go, and then I will kind of back my way away from that based on distance and time and things like that. So let's just say I live in an area where I don't have access to really cool spots. Like, I can't get all the way to Devil's Lake, or can't get all the way to this campground that I want to go to. So I'll pick the campground or the place that I want to end up, and then I'll back it up. Let's just say I'm 30 miles a day. I'm going to back up 30 miles, and I'm going to try to find a place around there to stay, a campground, a hotel, or something. Then if I have 2 days, I'm going to back it up another 30 miles, and I'll figure out my starting point from there. And so sometimes I've driven to my starting point, and I've parked in long distance parking or overnight parking. I've found a hotel who granted me the ability to park in the parking lot, and that will allow me to get to really awesome destinations. So consider those things when you're planning. So what type of gear do I need to take with me? That really all depends on how you plan to sleep. If you plan to camp every single night, then you will need items to camp: sleeping bag, tent, rain fly, food. You have to figure out all of your basic needs, and you have to kind of carry that on your bike. But maybe you're doing something called credit card camping, where you just want to enjoy the day. You really don't want to carry everything, and you want to maybe stop off at a B&B or a hotel or something like that. Then you carry simply your basic necessities for the day: enough food, drink, maybe safety kit, some tire repair items, just basic maintenance items. And then you're off at the credit card. You don't have, or I'm off at the credit card. You're off with your credit card to a hotel, and you can shower and change clothes and maybe wash clothes, and you don't have to carry as many clothes. So all of those things really play into how you plan on having your sleeping arrangements. And here's a great example of 4 different ways to bike tour. You can go fully loaded, which is every single thing you need to handle all of your basic necessities. Credit card, which I just described. Carry light because you do have a roof over your head, a plan for that at the end of each day. Bike packing, which is a very unique way to travel, carrying a lighter load, but oftentimes some of the same items to take care of your basic needs. It's configured a bit differently, and typically because of the way that you're traveling, typically bike packers are oftentimes in like more rocky terrain, sometimes off-road and things like that. So they really like to slim up and be more narrow. And then you see a mismatch, basically everything, a version of all different types to tour. So just a nice graphic image for you to see that there. And route planning. So route planning is something that is so enjoyable, and you can really have a good time planning out that future trip. These are some of the things that you need to consider. How much time do you have? The distance, the terrain, what type of services are available to you along the way? What type of scenery are you interested in seeing? And then you really want to plan some buffer time. What if something goes wrong? What if I have a challenge or I need to overcome something that takes a lot of time? You should build that into your planning. Don't ever bump yourself right up against you have to be back at work on Monday, so you're taking your trip all the way through Sunday. Don't plan that way. It can really go bad quickly, and just remain flexible. So give yourself some buffer time so that you're flexible and you're not stressed. Here are just some resources to help you in your route planning adventure. I'm going to kind of click through, but Adventure Cycling is great. They have over 50,000 miles of maps that you can have access to. Here is the US bicycle route system merged with the Adventure Cycling map system. I mean, these routes really overlay. You have some amazing, amazing country to navigate. Here is a website, please write this down, bikeovernights.org. It is so awesome. It will share with you some of the things like I'm sharing here today, like bike overnights, first bike overnights, people who've done their overnight and they've submitted a trip story. And it's really awesome just kind of see people go along their adventure and share their experiences with you, because with bike touring, you truly do learn from others in the stories that are shared. So that's something you really want to take advantage of. More great resources for you, Ride with GPS, Rails to Trails Conservancy, bikepacking.com. Komoot is an app that I use, and it allows me to add to choose bike touring versus road riding, mountain bike riding, so that it really helps me plan a route around the terrain that I plan to travel. And then bicycle touring and bike backpacking is my favorite Facebook website resource. So check them out. A lot of experienced folks out there who can share information with you. All righty, moving on to how to pack. We kind of covered briefly the various ways you can travel, but here you see an example of someone with a trailer, panniers, a bike packing setup. So those are various ways that you can travel. Keep in mind that if you're going a long distance though, and you're strapping like a backpack on your back for the first time, it might not be the most comfortable thing. So I would just say, however you plan on traveling long distance, that you start to kind of incorporate that in your daily rides, get used to it, become accustomed to it, and it won't be something new and challenging when you first go out on your long distance tour. And my timer, boom, okay. So resourcefulness. You don't have to go out and buy brand new gear right away. These awesome kitty litter panniers are amazing, and it helps you understand if this is something that you want to do before you go and invest in the orderly like $300 panniers. So keep that in mind. Packing. When I pack, I kind of get dressed for the day. I literally evaluate myself from head to toe. I'm like, okay, what do I need for my head? Do I need like a certain bra? Do I need a certain shirt, layers, sleeves? What do I need for my neck? Do I need a gaiter? You know, and I work my way down my body until I have everything I need. Gloves, everything you got to consider. So just kind of lay it out, look at it, make sure you can get dressed start to finish. Food Food, food, food. One of my favorite things. I love to eat while I'm on tour. I love to be creative. Stop off at grocery stores, grab deli meat. Deli sections are amazing. Carry staples. In the center right there is what I carry on a daily basis. I always have little packs of olives, a jar of peanut butter, and a pack of tortillas, and I will be okay. Everything else you can just add to it. Consider what you like to eat. Don't change your diet the day before you go on a tour. Like, make sure that whatever you want to buy or bring or ad lib, you can kind of like scout the area and know what you're going to be able to have access to. But really, whatever works for your body, do that ahead of time, plan it, and carry it into your tour. You'll be very successful. And the cost. The cost can range from very minimal to very expensive, and everything in between. So with that being said, if you're on a tighter budget, be more frugal. Pack your own food, borrow some panniers, maybe not stay at a hotel, stay at a campground, go to warmshowers.com, stay at a host house, do things like that that won't cost you as much money. And lastly, safety. See and be seen. Whatever you're doing, make sure you're visible. Make sure people see you. Make sure you have the proper lighting that is going, if just in case you're in a dark or riding in the dark. And make sure you have flashlighting in the rear so the cars can see you from behind. I'm just sharing that I am super bright. I love my life. I want to make it back to bicycle another day. So that is kind of what you're seeing there. Do proper maintenance on your bike as far as checking the simple things, brakes, tires, bolts, things like that. Make sure you obey the traffic rules. A stop sign means that you have to stop as well, not just the car. And the other thing I like to quickly point out, be super careful at crosswalks and of people that are trying to be kind and allow you to cross. Oftentimes, cars, as they are traveling, will stop at the cross section and you want to go forward. But oftentimes cars will zoom around just to go around that car because they don't realize what they're doing. I like to stand there, smile, and wave those cars on by until I'm comfortable being clear. You do what you do, but just be cautious of that detail right there. And lastly, quickly, people always ask, what am I doing next? So I am possibly next year looking at doing the Underground Railroad as my big bicycle trip. If I can't make that work from a timing perspective, I will be going on mini bike trips right here locally around Wisconsin, engaging my Wisconsinites in bicycle overnights. So that is that. And lastly, just a few social details of how you can possibly find me if you're interested, or if you want to follow along for T-Guns Adventures and see what's excellent out there and what I'm doing in the world of bicycling. So thank you for having me today. This has been so amazing. A lot of content to cover in a short amount of time, but I truly appreciate the opportunity. Hopefully you enjoy this and have a wonderful day.
All right, thank you, Tara. That was great. So for those of you who just joined us, this is how to plan your next bike adventure. We just heard from Tara about multi-day adventures. Next up, we're going to have Suz Falvey. She's going to talk about mountain biking and gravel riding. And I, again, encourage anyone who has any questions about, anything that any of the speakers are saying, or even questions that, you have had before that you want this opportunity to ask them, just chat them over to the BikePGH moderator. I am going to get set up to screen share again. Let's see here. And then Suz is going to take it away as soon as I have navigated to where I need to be. Okay. Boop.
All right. Good to go. Hey everyone, I'm Suz Falvey, and thank you so much for sitting here and listening to me talk about mountain biking and gravel riding and planning your next adventure. I am a personal trainer and a bike builder by day and a bike racer by night and weekends. Done a ton of races and events, and been all around trying to find the greatest mountain biking and gravel riding I can find. So I really should have called this like Friends, Apps, and Maps, because the one thing that I rely on is my friends. Not yet. So I rely on my friends. And in these COVID times, I am really leaning on Facebook for events and virtual things that are happening. There is so much going on out there now, that's virtual, that you can join in if you have the right apps. So during these times when you can't really get as close with your friends, there's not as many races, there's ways to connect and go riding and get some adventure. This picture right here is an example of my friends and I deciding we wanted to get some of the best mountain biking in. It was about 4 years ago, and this is Kingdom Trails, Vermont. And this is my wedding picture, only I shouldn't really say that because I don't have this bike anymore. So, but this was an example of my friends and I getting together and being like, where should we go? Where should we get some good mountain biking? And Kingdom Trails was the buzz. So we're like, all right, we're going to go there. So it was a destination trip. Okay. So, we scheduled a place to stay that was, within biking of the great trails. And, we got a local maps. Okay. So that's the first thing, is like, get your local maps. So got those. And then, what I got into was like some apps. I use Trailforks and MTB Project. I'll get into that a little bit later, but, my job was to, find us some trails there. So I got the local map, I got Trailforks, and I looked and I saw like what people rode there. What was the local ride, and on those apps, it's rated like beginner, intermediate. They're really good. And on this last trip was in 2016, and I didn't go anywhere this year, so I'm not really sure how. I'm sure they're even better. But I was the one who plotted on the hard copy map. Suggestions from the apps, and then through that I used the hard map, and I'm old school, and a couple years ago, and went through the trails, but followed the trails, and I found a really nice first loop that my friends and I loved, and got a lay of the land. And from there, then I built my own, like, oh, hey, let's try this, let's offshoot that. So I used apps and maps to get acquainted with an area that I had no clue what I was riding. Now, I could have gone to a local bike shop, absolutely. But in these times right now, apps and maps, and yes, local bike shop, but you might be in a different place where you don't want to necessarily get out as much. You want to stay clear. And I get that. So, apps and maps are your friends these days. So, that I'll talk about the apps a little more in particular, but we'll go on to the next. So when you're preparing for your ride, Tara covered this earlier. I can't stress this enough. Prepare for the worst, but be ready for the best. Be that person who, when someone's tire pops, hey, I have a tubeless repair kit, or hey, I have a spare tube, or hey, I have a pump. Like, you be that person. Carry it every time. If you're 2 miles down the road and that happens, you're going to be so happy that you have it, that you don't have to walk 2 miles back home or whatever. And if you're way out there, you might want to consider carrying the pump. instead of just CO2s. I learned that lesson the hard way this summer when I took a longer bike ride and I ran out of CO2s when I got a flat, and I wished I had a pump. So, you know, carry at least those things, some cash, food and water. I can't say that enough. You think you're going to be out for half hour, and something happens, you get a flat or whatever, you need something. So I just can't stress that enough. And probably the next person that talks is going to say the same thing because it's just so important. So carry these items. But you also, on these apps and maps, you want to carry your phone and or a Garmin. I used my phone. Oh, it was so awesome. But you have to, you know, download these apps where you have Wi-Fi. Please keep that in mind. I'm going to stress that again later. But my phone, my Garmin, that came with me on every ride too, because I didn't know where the heck I was going. Or you want a map, okay? So, you know, you want to have those things with you every time, and when you're doing some of these rides that I'm talking about, okay? All right, next please. All right, here we go. So here's some of those awesome apps, particularly Trailforks, MTB Project, Trail Link. Like, those were so great because they give suggested rides or, you know, local favorites, and, you know, things to look into. Strava, I love Strava. Some people don't, I don't think they offer a free service anymore, but the greatest thing was I did this really super neat virtual challenge this summer, and it helped me sort of save my sanity and get into using the maps and apps, you know, to do my rides. So Strava and Garmin, Ride with GPS, Tarra talked about that earlier. That is an amazing app that I'll use for gravel rides more than mountain biking. You know, where are you going around the city? Here in Pittsburgh, we have a great trail system, and Trail Pittsburgh. We can go to the next one. Trail Pittsburgh has a list of 15 of the mountain bike parks. And man, I think I can ride my bike to like 12 out of the 15 here. And I live in Point Breeze. So, you know, which one of these parks do you want to go to? Actually, Trail Pittsburgh's having kind of a contest. So, you know, if you visit the park and, you know, like take a photo of yourself, it counts towards something. So it'd be nice to, if you're in Pittsburgh, to take a look at that. If you're not in Pittsburgh, I hope you have a local trail, you know, system advocate that you can rely on to, you know, show you the direction. These are great places. You know, load one of them up. Do you want to go to Frick Park? Do you want to go to North Park? Download that, the app, and look that up on Trailforks or Single Track, some of the apps that I showed earlier, and it'll show you suggested routes in North Park to follow. If you put in your handy dandy little earpiece, it will tell you when to turn left, when to turn right, when to, if you're off course, if you choose. So this really cool. You can pick courses, you can pick to follow. Now, you know, I'm not a big advocate of like wearing 2 headphones, but one, and then I can hear what's going on. But please do what feels comfortable. Like if that's not comfortable, just watch on your phone, but then that's tough too, because you want to be safe. So, you know, there's, I have this, I listen, it's awesome. It tells me where to go, and I need that a lot. So, but these parks, how do you get to them? Well, next one, please. The next one, because it is the Bike Pittsburgh. Yeah, Bike Pittsburgh. I'm not just plug and Bike Pittsburgh. I love their map. I used their hard copy map this summer, and it was so awesome to plot out routes, places. It tells you everything you need to know to ride your bike as safely, as comfortably as you want. Also, Google Maps in the bike mode takes you bike-friendly avenues as well. So when I didn't have the Bike Pittsburgh map in my hand, I went to the Google Maps, and same thing, like when I plotted out like where I wanted to go, the Google Maps told me, and it took me some really neat places here in Pittsburgh. So getting to the parks from your house, you can ride and follow these maps, or, ride there, ride the park, ride at home, or get in your car, drive to the park and get some mountain bike and dirt, because, we got some great parks. Let's take it on back to the gravel. So getting some gravel, same thing, you want to, have some gravel friends. Sweetwater Bikes, they're a local bike shop around here, and they're really into setting up some routes, some gravel routes. And they're the people that got me into the ride with GPS. So one day they were doing a ride, and they went in the morning, and it was they're a family-owned shop, but they went in the morning, and they sent me the route, and my girlfriend and I rode later in the day, and it was awesome. So we did the same route, but I rode with GPS, and followed the same route. There's race courses, there's race course loops that local gravel race directors are putting out there, because they're not putting together gravel rides, with hundreds of people showing up and together right now. Some are doing it and they're being socially distant, but other people are finding other ways to put out gravel routes, and that's so great. There's gravel here in Pittsburgh, and it's definitely around, but I have to use my maps a little more. I have to rely on friends a little more that way. But there's also state forests, which there's Moshannon, which is not a far drive away, and you can get some gravel that way. And same thing, if you're going to go, go to Moshannon, get your apps, Google, take a look on the apps, like what recommended rides are there, do it with your Wi-Fi, download it, and then once you go, if you don't have Wi-Fi, you can use it. So the gravel groups, Sweetwater Bikes, the mountain biking groups, High Speed Dirt, Pittsburgh Off-Road Club, and then there's a local bike race here that's called the Month of Mud, and it's held in October, and they usually hit 5 of the local parks. Now, it's a race series, but it's a way to check out the parks, and it's usually a really neat way that they put the ride together. You don't have to race. There's absolutely a way you can go and just test ride the course for free. You don't, but if you want to ride and do it competitively, there's the Month of Mud race series as well here in Pittsburgh. Let's see, Strava did some local things. I did a 91 segment, because there's 91 neighborhoods in Pittsburgh, and I did a 91 segment challenge in the month of August. So somebody here in Pittsburgh listed 91 suggested, segments in Pittsburgh in the 91 neighborhoods, and you had to go ride them and log a time and everything. And I used the Bike Pittsburgh hard copy map to indicate to myself like where I had gone, what I had done, and then I used the Strava segment locator, and then I used my phone. So I used all three things for this neat Strava challenge. So you can get as creative as you want, or you can get into these challenges. But I guess, the best thing is like, to do these things, find some friends, socially distance, find out where, use Facebook for a good cause, local events or virtual events. Check out Trail Pittsburgh, check out Bike Pittsburgh. They've got a new interactive map coming on. And again, I'm not pushing them because like they're awesome. This interactive map is going to be great. So I can't wait to use it. But like I said, I haven't done that yet. I just used the hard copy. And I, really enjoyed it. It was such a challenge, so much fun. And, go get some dirt. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Suz. And you might not be comfortable plugging Bike Pittsburgh, but I am.
Okay,
and
good.
if you love the Pittsburgh bike map.
I did. It was a game changer for me. It really was. And during COVID, I nerded out on it and loved it. So,
yeah. Well, we've got version 8 coming out soon, and the best way to support the bike map is to become a member. And if you want to be the first one to get your hands on a copy of version 8, sign up now and we will happily mail you out version 8 bike map. I'm really excited about it. It's going to be awesome. All right. Yeah. So next we have Monica Van Dieran. Thank you so much, Suz. That was great. Monica Van Dieran is going to be talking about long distance biking. So take it away, Monica.
Yeah. Okay, good. All right. So there's a QR code here, or there's a link in the chat. You're welcome to join. I try to make this interactive. I'm a teacher and I'm behind these Zoom screens all day long. So I know just listening to PowerPoints one after another can get a drag. So trying to make it a little bit more interactive. So as I'm talking here, you're welcome to join that, and a poll question will pop up in a second, or in a couple minutes actually. So I'm Monica Van Dieran. I'm a professor at Robert Morris University, and I moved to Pittsburgh in the mid-90s. I used to bike a lot in Iowa where I grew up, but when I moved to Pittsburgh, my bike essentially just stayed in the garage because I was intimidated by all the hills out here. And it wasn't until my 39th year that my husband kind of encouraged me to get back on the bike in Pittsburgh, and I started biking in April, and by May, I had gotten up to doing 39 miles on my 39th birthday, and I ended that ride crying. But that's sort of how I got back into biking after a long time away from it. And I fell in love with it again very quickly and started doing longer and longer rides. By the end of that summer, I was up to a 100-mile ride, and that got me into randonneuring and ultracycling, which I'll talk a little bit about here today. And a great training for that for me was to commute by bike to work at Robert Morris. So I'm also the former president of the WPW, which is the organization that is the parent organization for the Pittsburgh Randonneurs. And I'm also part of the Aero Dog race team, which is sponsored by two great local companies, Aerotech Design and Bear Dog Bikes. So talk a little bit about ultracycling first, and then randonneuring. Sometimes we think about ultracycling, we think about like really professional racers. I'm not one of those. But the nice thing about ultracycling is that women tend to be up on par with men in terms of the competition. In fact, women are beating men quite often in long distance racing. Lael Wilcox, for instance, was the first overall of the Trans Am bike race a few years ago and holds several records. And Amanda Coker, of all men and women, is the highest annual mileage record with 86,000 miles in 1 year. So we can do it. But this isn't about ultra racing, but much more about bike adventure. So when you think about bike adventures and cycling, what 3 words do you associate with it? I put my first 3 words up there. I find it's a great place for me to gain peace of mind. All I'm thinking about is biking and getting to my destination and keeping myself healthy. What do you think about? Oh, these are great. I feel many of them. Nervousness, definitely. It's not always a guaranteed plan. We talked about being prepared for the worst and but enjoying the best of the ride. And I think that Sue's made a great point there, and I'll be building off of it today. So a little bit of nervousness was planning, but once we're out there, there's adventure, independence, freedom. This is great. Escape. I love that. We're all on the same page here. And yes, flying down hills. Who doesn't enjoy that? Okay, so I'll have another chance for you to enter a poll question here in a minute, but just wanted to give you a chance to reflect on your own cycling and adventures and what you are planning for. So I want you to think about ultra cycling maybe in a different way, by thinking about it as just a way to set yourself a time goal. It doesn't have to be a 12-hour or 24-hour race. It can be just, I'm going to ride my bike for 3 hours today, or I'm going to ride my bike for 1 hour, whatever it might be, wherever you're at, whatever you want to challenge yourself with. Other ways to set goals for yourself in an ultra cycling sort of fashion would be to set a distance. Maybe you want to try for that century ride, that 100-mile ride, or even an elevation gain. There's something called Everesting, where you pick a hill and you go up and down and up and down and up and down all day long. I've never done it. It doesn't really appeal to me, but maybe it appeals to you. And you try to get the same elevation as climbing Mount Everest. It's quite challenging here. But we have the hills in Pittsburgh for it, so that's always an option. I got a map here of Pennsylvania. There's an annual race called Crush the Commonwealth, which is an unsupported sort of ride where individuals leave from Pittsburgh and end up to Philly, or every other year it flips. Some years they start in Philly and come to Pittsburgh. And one of our local legends, Steph Birch, won that race, beating all of the guys as well 1 year. So that was very great. And Steph is actually a mentor to me in cycling. She's the one that got me into ultra cycling and randonneuring. So I wanted to give a shout out to her and her achievements there. And sometimes these races, like the ones that are racing against the clock, where you have 12 hours to get as much miles in as you possibly can, because it's set on time and not distance, you usually have a home base, like a school parking lot where you park your car and you set up your cooler, and then you get on your bike and you ride big loops and you keep coming back to your car, maybe every 50 miles, maybe every 20 miles, and refueling with more food and getting a new water bottle. Those are kind of difficult mentally, because you always come back to your car before that 12 hours is up. And so there's always that temptation to sort of quit. And my first 12-hour race, actually, it was about in the hour 9. I was having terrible pains and cramps and exhausted, and was really questioning why I even tried to do this. And got back to the car and took my shoes off, decided to call home and tell my husband that I'm on my way home, that I'm not going all 12 hours, this is ridiculous. But when I called home, my daughter answered the phone, and she was in middle school at the time. And she said, "Oh, Dad's not home right now." And I'm like, "Oh." And she said, and she's like, "What's up?" And I wasn't going to tell her that I was going to quit. So I said, "Nothing." I put my shoes back on, got my bike, and I finished that 12-hour ride. I did not want to show her that I was a quitter. But there are times when you're on one of these long distance rides, and the best thing for you to do is quit. And you've got to make that judgment call. I have called home and had my husband pick me up on occasion when I was overheated, or something went bad, mechanical that I couldn't fix, and that sort of thing. So that's a little bit about ultra cycling. Randonneuring is like more laid back and low key. It's still long distance. It's from the roots go back to France and Rome and Italy with long rides and tours that ended up turning into the Tour de France, but they also morphed into randonneuring. And the word audix, it comes from a Latin root that means to dare. So it's daring yourself to go some long distance. It can be anywhere from 100 miles all the way up to 1,200 kilometers, actually, a several day unsupported ride but it's not really a race. So you've got a route given to you and you have checkpoints along the way. The checkpoints are usually at convenience stores like we see here at Sheetz, which is why locally we usually call them Tour de Sheetz, because you're just riding from Sheetz location to Sheetz location and refueling at each of those stops. And there are time limits, but they are set so that it's 8 miles per hour is sort of the minimal speed to finish on time. And it's not really that you're racing against the other people that you're doing this with. You're just enjoying the route and seeing what you can do on your own power. And I don't know. There's a local Pittsburgh randonneuring group that goes out and they set up these rides and you can join on, and they're a very welcoming group. Steph is in that photo with me, and Jim Logan. They both are longtime randonneurs in Pittsburgh, and both have mentored me along rides, starting from a pure beginner up to now where, you know, I can just jump on my bike sometimes and do a 200 mile if I want to. That's a local resource for you all if you're interested in getting into randonneuring. But before going on a long ride, whatever long means to you, to what extent do you prepare for these different things? Because we're talking about preparing for adventures here. What do your usual preparation plans involve? So we see a lot bouncing around here as our results come in. But what looks to be the case is that first aid is sort of low on the list, and I'll talk a little bit about that here in a minute. Because you never know what's going to happen on one of these long rides, and you might be far away. If you're on a long ride, chances are you've gone far away from town, and you might be 20 miles from your nearest grocery store, Target, convenience store, and first aid location. So bringing that first aid with you is going to be really important. And you never know what will happen. You could be the best rider on earth, but that raccoon decides to run across the road right in front of you. Happened to me. And you flip your bike as you hit that poor raccoon and need first aid, and you're 20 miles away from the nearest town in the middle of Missouri. Like, you got to figure it out. And so the tip I have with the first aid is that it's tempting just to buy the one that they have at Walgreens or Target that's in the little cute container and you pop it in your bag. But those Band-Aids are so small. And when you wipe out on your bike, you do not get those small cuts. You get the road rash. So create your own first aid kit is my big tip for any sort of long distance ride where you might need it. And hopefully you won't need it. But there are 5 F's that I plan for when I'm preparing for a ride, and we've mentioned the importance of fuel. You know, you need your water and your food, and you can't guarantee that you're going to necessarily find it on the way. So I have filled up my water bottle from the spigot of a church and from a spigot of a fire station outdoors. Sometimes you run into that desperate situation and you've got to do what you got to do. Bring cash with you, and also small denominations. I did find once a Gatorade vending machine, but I only took $1 bills and change. Thankfully, I had enough to get that Gatorade out of there because I really needed it on that ride. Fashion, and by that I mean you're going to be fashionably reflective, as much reflective gear as you can. And also the tip I would like to give you is to use wool. If you're going to go out on a long ride where it might be rainy or wet or sweaty, and I even wear a wool sports bra, as you know, sexy as that sounds, but it dries fast is the advantage of it. So wool socks, wool gloves, wool sports bras is sort of my tip for these long distance rides. Make sure everything's functioning, and that includes silly things like your water bottle cage. That actually is broken once for me. And then you've got to figure out how you're going to carry that water that you so desperately need on these rides. And going off of what Sue said, you'll definitely want to use your apps, but also your paper maps, because if you're on a long ride, you may be out of cell phone signal reach, Or if you're on one of these really long rides, your battery will die. You can't rely on it completely. Many of these devices have like a 12-hour time span, and your 12-hour ride might turn into much longer than that. A wrong turn can take a 100-mile ride and turn it into 120. So prepare ahead of time by memorizing those maps, bringing them with you in a Ziploc bag in case you need them, and ask for help if you need. Ask for directions. People are pretty good at getting you back on track if you need to. So here are just some resources. The PittsburghRandonneurs.com and the WPW is our local stop for doing randonneuring events. And there's the National Ultra Cycling website for those types of races if you're interested in. And if you want to start low key and get a sense of randonneuring, the fun part of it without the long distance, there's a coffee-neuring challenge going on right now, where for the next 7 weeks, or next, I think, yeah, 7 weeks, you go one coffee shop per week, and you post it on social media, and that's run by a randonneur in the Washington, D.C. area, and her blog is chasingmailboxes.com. So you should check that out if you just want a low-key way to learn about randonneuring. That option's for you. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Monica. We've learned a lot. So I, again, want to thank Tarra and Suz and Monica all for, lending their expertise to all of us and talking us through some things that, I think a lot of us are interested in dabbling in, but haven't, necessarily gotten there. And I hope that this is something that people can use as a jumping off point to do their first long distance ride. Do it, everyone. All right, so let's see if we have some questions from the group. Kea?
Yeah, we have quite a few questions, so we'll try and get through everything, but yeah, if we can try and keep responses as concise as possible from our panelists here. First question is from Lindsay. How do you figure out what your bike can handle in terms of picking a route or trail? They have an all-city space horse with the intention of doing a longer multi-day ride, but didn't know if it could handle single track or gravel. And I think most of these questions came in during Tara's segment, but I think everybody also tended to cover some of these things. So if we have addressed them, but yeah, Tara, if you had a thought.
Yeah, so I'll jump in here. It really depends. I'm not familiar with the type of bike that you mentioned, but I'm just going to speak generically. Frame type is something to consider. Like if you're on a carbon frame versus an aluminum frame or steel frame, you can typically look up load capacity for steel frame or load capacity for carbon frame. And generically, that'll come up on the internet there for you. But also ask your local bike shop specific. Like I like to take that actual bike into the bike shop and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking of doing. Do you think that I'll be safe if I carry roughly this amount of weight? And just have them kind of like hone in on your own situation to make sure that you're safe. Sometimes generic answers aren't the best way to go. It's best to kind of try to dial in on that equipment. So hopefully that helped.
Great. Mary asks, if you're camping without much access to electricity or outlets, how do we keep our bike lights charged?
I'll chime in quickly here as well. So I have a solar panel that I travel with on my bike that is very useful if there's sun, but it also, natural light, it'll charge a little bit. And also a very small rechargeable battery would be helpful. And sometimes if your campsite doesn't have it, it's good to know that ahead of time and try to consider building in a little stop time at a gas station or something like that. So if you're rolling in a camp and you're about an hour from camp, but you're passing a gas station, go ahead and stop there, plug everything in, run inside, bathroom, shop, dinner, and you get about 30 to 40 minutes worth of charge while you're doing necessities anyway. And that kind of helps.
Awesome. Georgia asks, any advice for solo bike touring? We did cover a little bit of that, but in terms of carry your cash, make sure you've got everything you need, prepare for the worst, but any additional advice in terms of solo?
My feedback here, I'm jumping in here, please don't let me hog the mic, but make sure you're aware of the emergency resources in the area that you're planning to stay. So for example, maybe fire stations, police stations, churches, things like that. And another good safety tip is to make sure that your loved ones or friends have the ability to kind of have an idea of your sample itinerary and maybe a way that they can reach you in the event that you don't have service. And if you are really cautious, which I do this, I carry some sort of GPS spot tracker or something like that, that even if I run out of cell phone service, I can still reach my loved ones and make that phone call. That's extremely helpful. And yeah, you'll feel more safe if you have something like that as well.
Great. This question is from Kat. How has the pandemic affected your planning and strategies for multi-days or overnights bike packing and touring?
All right, I'm jumping in again. Okay, so the pandemic for me has affected it by way of really respecting the boundaries of everyone's comfort zone. So what I mean by that is I tend to often travel solo, and I used a lot of warm showers host. The folks that I let them know up front, hey, I'm traveling on bicycle touring. How do you feel about the pandemic? Would you mind simply hosting me from a campground perspective? Because mostly all of the campgrounds are closed. So I would pull up to these folks' house and they would give me access to their backyard and maybe a spare bathroom or something like that, where I didn't really have to come into a lot of contact with them or spread particular any germs or anything. And then being very respectful of the way that I sanitize after I leave their personal space or their personal like bathroom or whatever. So just being cautious of those things is still very doable, but of course trying to follow the guidelines and respecting others, the space of others, so that they maintain safe as well.
That's great. And the last question, I guess, is for the panel in general. So we'll go over, I guess let's ask Suz first, and then go to Monica about what are some of your favorite bike trips you've taken or favorite trails that you've ridden? Monica?
So, me?
Perfect. Oh, there you are.
Okay. So, well, I showed a picture of Kingdom Trails and Asheville because I, looked up where is the, best single track, and also like where is it marked well, because and nowadays it's marked well almost everywhere. But for me, it was really helpful. I went to Asheville and Kingdom Trails in Vermont, and then West Coast, I went to Bend, Oregon, which is amazing. So those are my three.
Well, you could give a shout out to the Gap. You can't ignore the Gap.
Right,
yeah,
right.
Yeah. I also, the photos from my presentation were in the Smoky Mountains, and there's some great riding down there, up Mount Mitchell or Clean Moon's Dome. The Katy Trail is in Missouri. It's kind of like the Gap, but through Missouri. But the warning there is it's much more rural than the Gap is. There's fewer stops. That's where I ran into water a lot. Many of my run out of water stories were from there. So that's my only warning there, but there's some really quaint bed and breakfasts along the way that are great to go to. So those are my favorites.
And I guess I'll chime in with my favorite. Of course, Pittsburgh to DC was wonderful. It was phenomenal. But I have to really highlight my very first bicycle tour, where I went from Goodhart, Michigan to Ludington, a point to point by myself, my first real adventure experience. And how I arrived at that was I literally crafted a simple message. It was during the pandemic. I'm looking to cycle through your area from this date to this date. Would you consider hosting me? And I took all of the yeses and I drew a line, and that was my route. So that's how I did it. It was amazing.
Nice.
I love that. That looks like all the questions that we have. So I'll kick it back over to Christine.
Cool. Yeah, again, thank you, our presenters, Tarra, Suz, and Monica. Thanks to everybody who asked a question. Thank you to everybody who, had anything that they learned. I hope that, again, you will learn to try all of this on your own. And then quickly, I just want to review where we're going next. So hang on one second. Okay, so you just finished up with how to plan your next bike adventure. And then next we're going to take a 15-minute break, and we're going to do some DIY bike maintenance with the lovely Carrie Tippin. So thank you, everyone. Stick around and, you know, stay connected, everyone. Make sure you're following us along.